I stood silent in my civilian clothes, watching my brother proudly receive his SEAL trident. My father had never looked at me that way since the day he declared me a Navy dropout 6 years ago. But the truth was different. Every scar on my body tells a story my family was never allowed to know, until today. Before I dive into my story, I want to know where you all are watching from. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories like this. Growing up in the Jackson family meant one thing. Above all else, military service was not just a career choice, it was our legacy. My father, Robert Jackson, served as a Navy SEAL for 22 years, completing missions that earned him respect throughout the naval special warfare community. My grandfather fought valiantly in World War II, earning multiple commendations for bravery on the beaches of Normandy. Every uncle, great-uncle, and male cousin in our family tree had served in some branch of the military. From my earliest memories, I knew my path was predetermined. The walls of our family home in Virginia Beach were adorned with shadow boxes displaying medals, photographs of family members in uniform, and mementos from various deployments around the world. These weren't just decorations. They were expectations silently communicated to me and my younger brother Jake from the moment we could understand what they represented. Despite this pressure, I genuinely loved the idea of serving my country. I excelled in sports throughout school, pushing my body to its limits in preparation for what I knew would be the grueling physical demands of military service. Swimming became second nature to me. I could hold my breath underwater for over 3 minutes by the time I was 17. Running 5 miles before school became my normal routine by junior year. Jake was 4 years younger than me, but what he lacked in age, he made up for in determination. Even as a kid, he would wake up early to join me on shorter runs, his little legs pumping twice as fast to keep up. Our backyard became our training ground, where I taught him proper push-up form, how to navigate makeshift obstacles, and the mental toughness that would serve him well later in life. Tommy, do you really think I can be a SEAL someday like Dad Jake asked me one evening as we sat exhausted after a particularly intense training session? Not just like Dad, I told him, ruffling his hair. Better than Dad? His eyes lit up with that statement, and I meant it. Jake had a natural ability to push through discomfort that even I envied sometimes. The day I graduated high school was one of the proudest moments in my father's life. He stood taller than usual as I announced my enlistment in the United States Navy, with the goal of eventually joining the SEALs. My mother cried tears of joy and worry simultaneously, a combination I would come to understand intimately years later. Jake beamed with pride, looking at me like I was already wearing the trident pin that SEAL operators earn after completing their training. "You make this family proud, son," my father said, gripping my shoulder with a strength that communicated everything words could not. "This is just the beginning." That night, Jake snuck into my room after everyone had gone to bed. "Promise you will help me when it is my turn," he whispered. "I want to be just like you." "I promise," I replied, not knowing how complicated keeping that promise would become. "When the time comes, I will be there to guide you every step of the way." 2 months later, I began basic training. The physical aspects came easily to me thanks to years of preparation, but the mental discipline and absolute conformity required took some adjustment. Still, I excelled. My scores on physical tests were consistently in the top percentile. My marksmanship was noted by several instructors as exceptional. I was exactly where I was meant to be on the path my family had traveled for generations. Letters from home kept me motivated. My father wrote with advice about upcoming challenges. My mother sent cookies that I shared with my whole division. Jake sent crude drawings of what he imagined my heroic naval adventures to be complete with sea monsters and enemy ships. These connections to home reminded me of why I was pushing myself so hard every day. By the time I completed basic training, I had distinguished myself enough to be selected for the preliminary screening that would determine whether I could enter the SEAL training pipeline. This was the first crucial step toward fulfilling my family's expectations and my personal ambitions. The path ahead would be grueling, but I was ready, or so I thought. 3 days after completing basic training with honors, I was approached by a man in civilian clothes while on a short liberty period. He introduced himself as Commander Phillips, but provided no unit affiliation. "Private Jackson, I would like to speak with you about an opportunity." He set his voice low, despite the fact that we were alone. "Your performance has caught the attention of some important people." Confused but intrigued, I followed him to a nondescript office building just outside the base. Inside, I was introduced to Colonel Marcus Harris, a stern-faced man with penetrating eyes that seemed to evaluate my every movement. Jackson, I am going to be direct with you, Colonel Harris began after dismissing Commander Phillips. You have been identified as a potential candidate for a specialized unit that officially does not exist. Over the next 2 hours, Colonel Harris explained that they had been watching me throughout basic training. My physical abilities, psychological evaluations, problem-solving skills, and background had made me a prime candidate for a highly classified special operations unit that operated outside the traditional military structure. This is not the SEAL's son, Harris clarified. What we do goes beyond what conventional special forces can accomplish. We answer to a very small chain of command, and our missions are known only to those with the highest security clearances. My mind raced as I processed this information. This was not the path I had envisioned, not the future I had prepared for or promised my family. The SEALs were legendary, respected, and most importantly to me, at that moment something my father would understand and celebrate. Sir, I am honored by the consideration, I said carefully, but my goal has always been to become a Navy SEAL. My family has a tradition, and I have made promises. Colonel Harris nodded, seeming to have anticipated this response. I understand family tradition better than most, Jackson. My grandfather and father were both Army Rangers, but sometimes we are called to serve in ways our families cannot know or understand. He slid a folder across the desk. Before you make your decision, I want you to understand exactly what we are offering and what we are asking. The folder contained limited information about the unit's capabilities and mission parameters, all carefully worded to reveal little concrete information. What was clear, however, was that accepting this position would mean disappearing from my current trajectory in a way that could not be explained to anyone, including my family. If you accept, we will need to create a cover story, Harris explained. As far as the Navy and your family are concerned, you washed out of training. A disciplinary issue, perhaps, or an inability to meet standards. Something plausible but final. No honorable discharge, no continued service. The implications hit me like a physical blow. My family would believe I had failed, that I had broken our tradition of service. My father would be devastated, disappointed. Jake would lose his hero and guide. I cannot tell my family the truth. Ever, I asked, already knowing the answer. Security is paramount. The work we do cannot be compromised, and knowledge of the unit's existence is strictly limited. Your family cannot know. I requested time to think, which Colonel Harris granted, but limited to 24 hours. This was not a decision to be taken lightly, yet I had almost no time to consider it fully. That night, alone in my barracks, I wrestled with the impossible choice. Pursue the path my family expected, that I had always envisioned for myself, or take this divergent road that promised to serve my country in ways few ever could, but at the cost of my family's respect and understanding. By morning, my decision was made. I returned to Colonel Harris and accepted his offer. The next week was a blur of paperwork, briefings, and preparations. I signed more non-disclosure agreements than I could count, each one emphasizing the absolute secrecy required. A fictional narrative of my failure in the Navy was carefully constructed, designed to be believable, yet sufficiently disappointing to discourage too many questions. Then came the hardest part. I was allowed one final phone call home before I would officially leave the Navy and begin my new covert life. I would not be allowed to contact my family again unless specifically authorized, which I was told rarely happened. My father answered the phone, his voice full of the pride that would soon turn to ash. Dad. I began hating every word I was about to say. I need to tell you something difficult. I am leaving the Navy. The silence that followed was deafening. What do you mean, leaving? He finally asked, disbelief coloring every syllable. I cannot do this. I lied, each word burning my throat. I thought I could, but I cannot meet the standards. They are processing my discharge papers now. What followed was worse than I had imagined. My father's voice transformed from confusion to anger, to a cold disappointment that cut deeper than any knife. I do not understand, he said finally. This is not the son I raised. This is not a Jackson. I wanted to tell him everything, to explain that I was making this sacrifice to serve in a way few ever would, but the words remained trapped behind the wall of secrecy I had already sworn to maintain. I am sorry was all I could offer. Sorry does not cut it, Tommy, he replied, his voice hard as granite. Do not come home until you figure out how to be the man I thought you were. The line went dead, and with it my connection to the life and family I had known. 2 days later, I officially left the Navy as far as any records accessible to the public were concerned. In reality, I began the most intense training program imaginable, disappearing into a shadow world where my true service would begin. The training facility was located on an unmarked compound in a remote area I was never told the exact location of. My first day there, I met the 19 other recruits selected for the program. Like me, they had all been extracted from various military branches. All had exceptional records, and all had left behind lives and identities to serve in this clandestine capacity. Our training made standard Special Forces preparation look like elementary school physical education. Days began at 3:30 in the morning and often did not end until midnight. Physical conditioning pushed beyond conventional human limits. Tactical training covered scenarios I had never imagined possible. Intelligence analysis, languages advanced, weapon systems, covert infiltration techniques, survival skills, and dozens of other specialized areas of study filled every waking moment. The attrition rate was staggering. Of the 20 who began, only 7 completed the first phase of training. I was one of them, though there were countless moments I thought I would break. Each day brought new challenges that seemed impossible to overcome, yet somehow I persevered. During these grueling months, thoughts of my family sustained me through the darkest moments. I imagined my father eventually learning the truth and understanding my sacrifice. I pictured Jake looking up to me again, once he knew what I had really been doing all this time. These fantasies kept me going when my body and mind wanted to surrender. After 14 months of training, I was officially inducted into the unit and given my first mission briefing. What followed were years of operations that officially never happened, in places I was never officially deployed to. Each mission blended dangerous precision with absolute secrecy. We moved like ghosts through hostile territories, completed objectives deemed impossible by conventional forces, and returned to obscurity with no recognition beyond our immediate chain of command. The physical toll was immense. During my second year, I took a bullet through my left shoulder while extracting a high-value asset from a hostile compound in a country I cannot